It always starts with a smile. A carefully practiced smile that can charm cameras, melt crowds, and make the world believe they're witnessing grace in human form. But behind that perfect smile, there's often another story. A story that no one dares to tell, until now. For years, the world has seen Meghan Markle through a glossy lens. The humanitarian, the modern duchess, the woman who dared to defy the palace machine and carve her own path. But what if the woman we saw, the one hugging schoolgirls in South Africa, smiling for Vogue covers, and speaking about compassion, wasn't the same person behind closed doors? What if that image was a perfectly scripted illusion? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The truth, as it turns out, comes from someone who was there. Someone who saw everything. Someone whose entire job was to be invisible, to protect, nurture, and serve quietly. Her name is Lauren Khumalo, Archie Harrison's nanny. And for the first time, she's breaking her silence. When Lauren agreed to work for Meghan and Harry, she thought she was stepping into a fairy tale. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, newlyweds, expecting their first child, the world adoring them. It was every royal servant's dream assignment. But from the moment she entered the nursery at Frogmore Cottage, she realized that what the world believed wasn't what was really happening inside those palace walls. She says Meghan was different. Not just occasionally moody or demanding, but like two different people. In public, nurturing and poised. In private, cold, calculating, and obsessed with control. Every move rehearsed. Every word measured. Every emotion curated for effect. It wasn't motherhood that defined her. It was management, power, and precision. And Lauren watched it unfold, day after day. Now, before we dive in, let's pause for a moment and ask, how does someone go from being a symbol of empowerment to a figure of fear among her own staff? How does a woman who preaches kindness create such quiet chaos behind palace doors? And why, after all these years, is Lauren finally ready to tell her truth? To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning, to those quiet halls of Frogmore Cottage, where the scent of baby powder and tension mixed in the air, where a woman with a camera-ready smile walked past servants who lowered their eyes, and where a nanny, experienced, loyal, and loving, started to notice that something wasn't right. It began with small things. Strange rules, unusual restrictions, the constant presence of Meghan's personal assistants, not palace staff, but Hollywood hires. Every routine was micromanaged. Feeding times, clothing choices, even the color of Archie's blankets were dictated by Meghan. And when someone dared to question, the temperature in the room would drop. Lauren describes those moments as icy silence. A silence that spoke louder than shouting ever could. Meghan didn't always scream. Sometimes she simply looked at you, and that look said everything. She had a way of making you feel like you'd failed her, even if you hadn't, one former staffer once recalled in whispers. It was control by intimidation. The irony? Meghan's public speeches at the same time were filled with words like compassion, empathy, and sisterhood. She'd speak to global audiences about understanding others, while her team behind her winced, knowing the version of Meghan they saw backstage was entirely different. The contradiction was staggering, almost cinematic. A real-life split between image and reality. And yet, for Lauren, leaving wasn't an option, at least not in the beginning. She loved Archie. She adored him. The tiny giggles, the first smile, the gentle way he held her finger. That's what kept her going when the atmosphere grew unbearable. But even love, as she would later learn, couldn't survive under constant tension. What makes this story even more chilling is how hidden it was. The royal family is a fortress of secrecy. Everyone knows that. But Meghan's inner world was something else entirely, a fortress within a fortress. She ran her staff not like a royal household, but like a production set. Everyone had a role, everyone followed the script, and the director was always Meghan. Every photo opportunity, every public appearance, every press leak was planned down to the breath. And when someone deviated from her vision, it didn't end well. You see, Meghan's background wasn't just Hollywood, it was image-making. Years in entertainment taught her how to manipulate perception. She understood lighting, angles, and narratives. She knew that a well-timed tear in an interview could shift global opinion. And that's exactly how she ran her life, as a show. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling? When the applause fades and there's no script left? Lauren found out the hard way. There was one moment, a defining one, that made her realize she wasn't working for a family. She was working for a brand. It was late one evening, after a long day of press frenzy. Meghan had returned from a public engagement, glowing, smiling, waving to photographers. The world saw kindness. But once the doors shut behind her, the transformation was instant. The smile disappeared. The warmth evaporated. What replaced it was something sharp, almost electric. She turned to her staff and began listing every tiny imperfection from the day. A wrinkle in a blanket, a missed photo cue, a lighting error. And then, when Harry tried to calm her, she snapped. "This isn't good enough. We have to look perfect," she said. That line stuck with Lauren for years. We have to look perfect. Not be perfect. Look perfect. It said everything about Meghan's mindset. Image over authenticity, perception over peace. Now, you might wonder, why didn't anyone say anything sooner? Why didn't royal aides or other staff come forward? The answer is fear. Not of losing their jobs, but of being destroyed publicly. Meghan's team had mastered the art of narrative control. Any criticism became racism. Any complaint became misogyny. And that made her untouchable. Even within the palace, people treaded lightly. The fear of being labeled or canceled silenced many who knew the truth. But Lauren? She wasn't bitter. She wasn't vindictive. She stayed silent because she believed loyalty meant protection. She believed in discretion. Until that loyalty was betrayed. Until the moment Meghan turned on her, accusing her of something she didn't do. That, Lauren says, was when she realized that silence only protects the powerful. Still, this isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of revelation. A story of what happens when reality catches up with reputation. And it's not just about Meghan. It's about the system that enabled her. The world that rewarded image over integrity. Because let's be honest, didn't we all want to believe in the fairy tale? The idea that a Hollywood actress could marry a prince, change the monarchy, and bring compassion to the crown? It was the perfect story, until it wasn't. Behind every royal image, there's a quiet casualty. In this case, it was a nanny, a woman who entered that world with hope and left it with heartbreak. The one who saw Meghan's public speeches about kindness, knowing the tears she'd shed behind closed doors weren't her own. The one who watched Harry crumble under pressure while trying to hold his family together. The one who whispered to herself, night after night, "This isn't what it's supposed to be." And now, she's finally speaking. Her revelations aren't just about scandal. They're about truth. The truth of how people can lose themselves in power. The truth of how image can destroy intimacy. And the truth of how a single lie, repeated enough, becomes the only version people remember. But make no mistake, Lauren isn't out to ruin Meghan. She's out to reclaim her own peace. After years of silence, she's found her voice. And she's using it not for vengeance, but for clarity. Because, as she says, the Meghan you see isn't the one we lived with. That line, chilling, honest, unforgettable, echoes through every revelation that follows. It invites the question no one dared to ask. If the Meghan we see is an illusion, then who is the real one? The loving mother on camera? Or the perfectionist who controlled every heartbeat of her home? The victim of royal cruelty? Or the architect of her own chaos? One thing's certain, once Lauren began to talk, doors that had been locked for years began to creak open. Former aides, former staff, even palace insiders started whispering again. And soon, a picture began to emerge. A picture of manipulation, pressure, and emotional volatility that no press release could polish away. But before the world could piece together that full picture, before the headlines, the podcasts, the public reaction, there was one moment that set it all in motion. The day Lauren Kumalo first stepped into that royal nursery, holding Archie in her arms, and realized she was stepping into a story that would one day shake the monarchy. Because what she witnessed wasn't just about motherhood. It was about control. It was about power. And it was about a woman determined to create her own fairy tale, no matter who got hurt in the process. And as we dive deeper into this story, remember this. Behind every smile, behind every perfectly lit photo, there's always another version, the one no one's supposed to see. Because behind those palace doors, the woman the world adored was someone else entirely. But what exactly did Lauren see? What moment turned admiration into fear? And what secret was so explosive that it made Meghan's carefully built world start to crumble? That's where our story truly begins. The day the perfect nanny realized she wasn't in a fairy tale after all. Because the first red flag appeared before Archie was even born, and Meghan's words that day would haunt Lauren forever. She remembered the call like it was yesterday, the one that changed everything. A calm voice on the other end, polished and formal, saying, "Ms. Kumalo, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex would like to meet you." For a moment, Lauren thought it was a prank. Out of all the professional nannies across Britain, her name had reached the palace. She had worked with affluent families, diplomats, and public figures before, but never royalty. Never this. That night, she didn't sleep. She kept replaying the idea in her mind. Meghan Markle, the woman the whole world couldn't stop talking about. The American actress who had captured a prince and redefined what a royal could look like. The world adored her. The media painted her as warm, authentic, and fiercely independent. To care for her child, Lauren thought, would be an honor beyond measure. And yet, even before she met her, subtle warnings began to creep in. Quiet ones, indirect ones. When she arrived for the interview, a senior aide met her at the entrance of Kensington Palace. The aide smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the kind that hid something. "You'll do fine," the aide said. "Just be careful with how you speak. The Duchess likes things a certain way." That phrase, "a certain way," would come to define everything that followed. The interview was scheduled for precisely 3:15 p.m. Meghan's team called it a meeting, but it felt more like an audition. Every detail was deliberate: the lighting, the seating arrangement, even the temperature of the room. Meghan entered wearing a cream silk blouse, her smile dazzling, her tone warm and inviting. At first glance, Lauren was charmed. Meghan was articulate, gracious, and deeply engaged. She asked about Lauren's upbringing, her values, her approach to child development. She seemed genuinely interested. But there was something else in her eyes, a sharpness, a quiet calculation. Like she wasn't just listening. She was assessing, weighing, controlling the narrative. When Harry entered halfway through, everything shifted. He was casual, unguarded, almost boyish. He called Lauren mate within minutes and cracked a joke about sleepless nights and baby bottles. For a brief moment, she saw a glimpse of a normal couple, nervous, excited, in love. But Meghan didn't laugh. She simply smiled, turned to Harry, and said softly, "Let's stay focused." It was subtle, but it chilled the room. Lauren later said, "It was in that single moment I realized who held the power." She got the job 2 days later. An official letter arrived with embossed royal insignia, strict confidentiality terms, and a single line that stood out in the contract. The nanny must follow all personal directives issued by the Duchess without deviation. Most royal contracts include references to household management or adherence to palace standards. This one didn't. It mentioned only Meghan, not Harry, not the royal office, just her. That was the first red flag. But she brushed it aside. After all, every mother has her preferences. She convinced herself it was simply Meghan's attention to detail. She didn't yet know that detail meant control, and control meant power. When Meghan's pregnancy reached its final trimester, Lauren's duties began unofficially. She was briefed on protocols, meal plans, environmental temperature, approved baby products. Nothing unusual, until she noticed the extent of Meghan's restrictions. No scented detergents. No wool or cotton from non-ethical farms. No contact with standard royal fabrics. Meghan's team even banned traditional baby powders and insisted on specially imported organic substitutes from California. "Triple the price, but more brand-aligned," one assistant said. Brand-aligned. The term stunned her. Since when was a newborn's care about branding? Still, she complied. Every note she took, every instruction she followed. It was all to prepare for the perfect royal birth. Yet, behind the scenes, the atmosphere in the Sussex household was far from calm. Staff turnover was already alarming. Personal assistants had come and gone. One resigned after just 3 months. Another broke down in tears and left mid-shift. The official reason? Burnout. The real reason? Unreasonable demands. Lauren hadn't even started, but already whispers traveled through the palace grapevine. She overheard an older footman murmur, "It's like working on a movie set, not in a royal home." Another added, "You have to play your part, or you're out." And still, she pushed those thoughts aside. She told herself she was different. She was steady, nurturing, patient. She could handle any personality. She wasn't there to serve Meghan's ego. She was there for the child. But then came the day of the prenatal meeting, the one that still replayed in her memory like a broken reel. It was meant to be a routine discussion about baby essentials. Meghan's PR consultant, her stylist, and a member of her personal staff were present. Yes, her stylist. Not a palace official, not a midwife, a stylist. Lauren was confused. Why was fashion involved in a discussion about bassinets and blankets? Then Meghan made her expectations clear. We're redefining what royal motherhood looks like, she said, her tone firm. This isn't the 1950s. There will be no lace, no old-fashioned frills. Everything will be modern, minimalist, and photogenic. Photogenic. Another strange word for a nursery conversation. Lauren blinked, wondering if she'd misheard. Meghan continued, pacing the room as her stylist took notes. When people see Archie, Meghan said, they must see the future, not the past. Every image matters. Every detail tells a story. We're curating perception. Curating perception. Those words struck Lauren harder than she expected. She wasn't used to hearing a new mother talk like a publicist. It wasn't about warmth, comfort, or love. It was about optics. Then Meghan turned to her and asked, "Do you understand what I mean?" Lauren nodded, unsure what to say. Meghan smiled. "Good. I'm glad you're adaptable. We're going to do great things together." And just like that, the meeting ended, with a line that felt less like collaboration and more like direction. Later, in the quiet of her quarters, Lauren replayed that conversation. Curating perception. The phrase rolled around in her head like a warning bell she didn't yet recognize. She'd worked for celebrities before, yes, but never for someone who treated motherhood like a marketing campaign. Still, she kept reminding herself of her duty. Serve the family, protect the child, maintain discretion. That was her code. That was what she'd been hired to do. But as Meghan's due date neared, something darker began to surface. The Duchess grew increasingly tense, controlling every aspect of her environment. She'd issue last-minute changes, discard previously approved items, and reassign duties on a whim. If anyone hesitated, she'd fix them with a piercing stare and say, "I need this done my way." And yet, the moment cameras appeared, she transformed. Gentle voice, soft laughter, effortless elegance. To the world, she was the picture of serenity. Inside, her staff were silently unraveling. The contrast was jarring. One moment, she'd tear through notes, demanding impossible revisions to a press statement. The next, she'd pose for a photograph cradling her bump, whispering, "This is the happiest time of my life." Lauren later described it as watching someone switch characters. She could change personalities like changing costumes, she said quietly. You never knew which version you were getting. And then, just days before Archie's birth, came the moment that would shake Lauren's perception entirely. A briefing at Frogmore. Small room. Closed doors. Meghan was reviewing the birth announcement draft. A palace official gently suggested following the traditional format, the same one used for William and Kate's children. Simple, respectful, in line with royal precedent. Meghan read it once, set it down, and said, "No, we'll do it differently. This is my child. I won't have the palace dictate how I introduce him to the world." Harry shifted uneasily. The official reminded her that the announcement had to pass through the Queen's office. Meghan's eyes hardened. "Then they can wait," she said. "I'll release it when I'm ready. I decide the narrative." The room fell silent. Lauren looked at Harry, his face pale, his jaw tight. He didn't argue. He just lowered his head. That was the second red flag. Because in that instant, Lauren realized something that sent a chill down her spine. Meghan wasn't trying to fit into the royal system. She was trying to control it. The press later portrayed the Sussex's secrecy around Archie's birth as a modern, privacy-focused decision. But those inside knew it wasn't privacy Meghan sought. It was dominance. Control over the message. Control over the image. Control over who spoke, when, and how. It was never about protection. It was about power. And Lauren, standing quietly in that room, realized she was stepping into a storm far greater than she'd imagined. Because the first red flag wasn't just a hint, it was a warning. A warning that the woman she thought she'd serve with pride might not be the woman she truly was. And soon, that warning would become a full-blown alarm. The night Archie was born, when the world celebrated joy, and behind closed doors, something very different was unfolding. Because the birth that changed everything wasn't just the birth of a child. It was the birth of a new narrative. One that would pull everyone in and tear them apart from within. But what really happened that night? What did Lauren see that made her question everything she believed about Meghan Markle's kindness and grace? The answers came not in words, but in whispers. And the truth of that night would expose the first real crack in Meghan's royal fairy tale. And that's where we go next, to the birth that changed everything. The night when joy turned to control and the mask began to slip. It was supposed to be the happiest night of their lives. The birth of a royal child, a moment that would unite the world in joy. But behind those palace walls, joy wasn't the word anyone would use. Because for Meghan Markle, Archie's birth wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a production, a performance, a meticulously choreographed act where every second, every photo, and every emotion had to be perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, someone would pay. It began in silence. Late evening at Frogmore Cottage. The world believed Meghan was resting at home, hours away from labor. Newspapers had printed cheerful stories of a quiet night for the Duchess. But what they didn't know was that Meghan had already been whisked to a private facility, under strict secrecy. Even some royal aides weren't informed. Harry had personally insisted on minimal communication. The plan was controlled information only. Lauren, meanwhile, was kept in limbo. She received a short, urgent message at dawn. Be on standby. No location, no timing. Just those 3 words. That alone told her everything. This was no ordinary royal birth. Royal births, historically, followed tradition. The announcement, the hospital photos, the joyful presentation on the hospital steps, all choreographed in openness and celebration. But Meghan wasn't interested in that. She wanted privacy, or so she said. In truth, she wanted exclusivity. Control of the narrative from the very first breath. And when the news finally broke, hours after Archie had already been born, even senior courtiers were caught off guard. One aide famously muttered, "We're announcing a birth that's already history." But for Meghan, that was exactly the point. She wanted to stay ahead of everyone, to dictate what the public saw, when they saw it, and how they felt about it. When Lauren arrived at Frogmore the following morning, she was greeted by an eerie calm. The nursery was prepared to perfection, sunlight pouring through the curtains, fresh flowers, custom linens, and silence so thick you could hear your own breath. Harry was pacing, pale, anxious, visibly exhausted. His eyes looked like he hadn't slept in days. Meghan, by contrast, was radiant, calm, composed, almost too composed. She was holding Archie, wrapped in a white organic blanket, and smiling the same practiced smile the world would later see in the official photos. But the moment the photographers left, that smile vanished. She turned to her staff and said, "This blanket doesn't photograph well. Get rid of it." Lauren froze. The blanket? The one Archie had been wrapped in moments after birth? The one that was meant to be symbolic? A gift from the Queen herself? Meghan continued, voice sharp and clinical. "We're not using any of that outdated royal stuff. It makes us look old-fashioned. Replace everything. And I mean everything." It wasn't just a comment about aesthetics. It was a statement of rebellion. A declaration that Meghan would not be defined by tradition. But the more she tried to rewrite the rules, the more the atmosphere inside Frogmore began to crack. Within hours of returning home, Meghan had dismissed one aide and reprimanded another for improper handling of media timing. Harry tried to calm her, whispering that everyone's doing their best, but she cut him off. "No, they're not," she said coldly. "They're trying to make me look small." Lauren noticed it immediately, the tension, the suspicion, the growing paranoia. Meghan's need for perfection wasn't just about control, it was about power. She wasn't content to be a royal mother. She wanted to be a global symbol. And Archie's birth? That was Act 1. Behind the scenes, the household was spiraling. Staff operated in fear of triggering Meghan's temper. One assistant accidentally used a photo from a different set of linens in a draft announcement and was met with what Lauren later described as a fury unlike anything I'd ever seen. She could flip in seconds, the nanny recalled. It wasn't yelling. It was this quiet, sharp tone that could cut through you. Still, Lauren's priority was Archie. That innocent baby boy, so quiet, so unaware of the storm around him. She focused on him like a lifeline. But even her care became part of Meghan's control strategy. Every routine was monitored, every feeding logged, every nap tracked. Meghan wanted updates by the minute. She insisted on dictating what Archie wore, what music played in the nursery, and even how Lauren held him. One afternoon, Meghan entered the room mid-feed. Lauren had been softly humming to soothe Archie. Meghan froze. "What are you singing?" she asked. Lauren smiled gently. "Just an old lullaby, ma'am. My mother used to sing it." Meghan's face hardened. "Don't. He needs to hear calm, neutral tones. No emotional triggers." "Emotional triggers?" the nanny repeated softly, confused. "Yes," Meghan said firmly. "Music imprints emotion. We want control over that." It was in that moment that Lauren realized Meghan wasn't just managing her image. She was managing emotion itself. Every tone, every sound, every feeling, everything had to serve the narrative. And Harry? He drifted quietly in the background. Present, but distant. Always trying to please her, to avoid confrontation. There were nights when Lauren would hear muffled arguments through the walls. Harry's voice low, pleading. Meghan's, sharp, unrelenting. It was during one of those nights that the first crack became visible to more than just the staff. The official baby photo, the one meant to symbolize joy and unity, was a nightmare behind the scenes. Meghan wanted full creative control. She refused palace photographers and insisted on using her own team. When palace aides pushed back, citing protocol, she exploded. "I'm not going to be told how to mother my child for the sake of tradition," she snapped. "You had your way with Kate. Not with me." Those words spread like wildfire through palace corridors. To some, it was defiance. To others, it was arrogance. But to Lauren, it was pain. She saw a woman desperate to prove something. To herself, to the world, maybe even to the crown. Still, the damage was done. When the photos finally went public, Meghan smiled beside Harry, her eyes soft, her hand tenderly clutching his arm. The media called it a symbol of modern motherhood. But those who were there, those who saw the tears, the arguments, the staff in silence, knew it was all performance. And yet, perhaps the most chilling moment of all came days later, when Meghan gathered the staff for what she called a household reset. She stood in the living room, Archie sleeping in her arms, and announced, "We're building something historic here. The world will talk about us for decades. But I need loyalty. I need control. If you can't handle that, you can leave." No one spoke. No one moved. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a warning. Lauren realized she wasn't working in a home. She was working in a kingdom ruled by one woman's will. And as Archie's first days passed, the pressure only intensified. Meghan's public appearances became shorter, more calculated. Behind the scenes, Harry looked increasingly fragile, torn between duty and devotion. There was one evening, weeks after the birth, when Lauren walked past the nursery and saw Harry standing over Archie's crib, whispering. She didn't mean to overhear, but his words froze her. "I just want him to have peace," he murmured. "Not what we had, not this." That moment broke something inside her, because it wasn't just Meghan's struggle anymore. It was Harry's, too. He was caught in a trap he couldn't see a way out of. But Meghan didn't see it that way. To her, everything was progress. Every photo, every interview, every headline. Proof that she was shaping the royal narrative on her own terms. And the more success she tasted, the colder she became. Then came the night that would change everything. The night Meghan's mask slipped completely. It started with a minor disagreement, a simple matter of scheduling. A member of her team had arranged a call with a magazine editor at the wrong hour. A tiny mistake. But to Meghan, it was treason. The shouting began in the study, echoed down the hall. Lauren could hear fragments. Disrespect. Incompetence. You're lucky to be here. Then came the silence. The kind of silence that suffocates a house. Moments later, Meghan appeared in the corridor, breathing heavily, her expression composed again. She turned to Lauren and said softly, "Some people just can't handle excellence." Then she smiled, that perfect, polished smile, and walked away. It was in that eerie calm that Lauren realized something was terribly wrong. Because when a person can switch from rage to serenity in seconds, something inside them is breaking, or already broken. That night, she wrote her first private journal entry about the job. It contained just one sentence. "She scares me sometimes." And she wasn't the only one. In the following days, Rumors swirled among the staff about what really happened that night. Some said someone had secretly recorded the outburst. Others claimed Meghan's words had been relayed to senior aides. Either way, the fallout was coming. And when it came, it wouldn't be quiet. Because what was captured on that secret recording, the one the palace tried to bury, would make even Meghan's closest allies question everything they thought they knew about her. And that, Lauren would later discover, was the turning point. The night when silence ended, and the whispers began. The moment the world's most photographed mother stopped pretending, and the truth started to bleed through the cracks. Because the recording didn't just expose Meghan's temper, it revealed something deeper, something darker. And once you hear what it contained, you'll understand why even the palace couldn't protect her anymore. It's always the smile that fools you first. The way she could turn it on like a light switch, dazzling, disarming, impossible to distrust. But that smile, as Lauren would soon learn, was a weapon. Meghan Markle had mastered it long before she entered the palace. It was her greatest performance, warmth that concealed steel. And for a while, it worked flawlessly. Until one night, one recording, one private moment broke the illusion for good. No one knows exactly who pressed record. Some said it was a frightened assistant, desperate to protect themselves. Others whispered that it was part of a wider palace strategy. Evidence, should things spiral. But what everyone agreed on was this. Once that tape circulated behind palace walls, everything changed. Lauren never asked to hear it. She didn't need to. The look on people's faces told her enough. It wasn't the yelling that stunned them. It was the transformation. The way Meghan's voice changed, from gentle and soothing to sharp, unrecognizable. "You think you work for me," she had said in that chilling tone, "but I own the story. Don't forget that." That line, once repeated among the staff, became the whisper that followed her through every corridor. "I own the story." It was both a declaration and a threat. After that night, everything inside Frogmore felt different. Colder. The walls seemed to hold secrets. Conversations stopped when Meghan entered a room. Even Harry's laughter, once so frequent, began to fade into nervous silence. Lauren, meanwhile, focused on her duties, or tried to. But something about Meghan's energy had shifted. The kindness she'd once performed so effortlessly was now reserved for cameras alone. There was one morning, early spring, when Lauren walked into the nursery and found Meghan staring out the window, her reflection framed perfectly in the glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Meghan said softly, without turning around. "Yes, ma'am. The garden looks lovely today." "I wasn't talking about the garden," Meghan replied. "I was talking about this." She gestured to her reflection, the image of herself, glowing, elegant, untouchable. Then she smiled faintly. "People will always see what I allow them to see." Lauren froze. There it was again, the reminder that every moment, even private ones, were part of a controlled image. There was no Meghan off camera. There was only the brand. And yet, that brand was beginning to crack. The recording, though buried from the public, had ripple effects inside the palace. Senior aides became cautious. Certain privileges were quietly reduced. Invitations grew fewer. Meghan sensed it, and reacted with vengeance masked as composure. To the outside world, she was glowing, preaching kindness at charity events. Behind the scenes, she was demanding loyalty tests from her staff. She began making notes, lists of who supported her vision and who didn't. Aides whispered about color-coded files, names marked with subtle symbols. One morning, when a longtime palace attendant tried to offer advice about royal procedure, Meghan interrupted mid-sentence and said, "You've been programmed. I'm here to deprogram all of you." That was the moment Lauren began to see the depth of Meghan's conviction. She didn't believe she was breaking the system. She believed she was saving it from itself. But saving it meant controlling it. And controlling it meant controlling everyone around her, including those who cared for her child. There were days when Meghan's behavior seemed almost paradoxical. She'd walk into the nursery and melt at the sight of Archie, her voice dripping with affection. Moments later, she'd turn to Lauren and begin correcting her with unnerving precision. "Don't hold him that way. His socks don't match his blanket palette. He needs to learn to self-soothe, not depend on touch." One afternoon, Meghan scolded her for humming again. "You keep doing that," she said, tone flat. "You're trying to bond with him. That's not your role." Lauren blinked. "My role, ma'am?" is to nurture and protect. Meghan smiled, cold and clinical. No, your role is to execute. The nurturing, that's mine. The control, that's also mine. The words sank like ice into the air. There was no emotion in them, just certainty. It wasn't cruelty in the traditional sense. No shouting, no name-calling. It was the kind of coldness that cuts deeper, detachment disguised as professionalism. And yet, even as she maintained this icy dominance, Meghan's public image was soaring. She was being celebrated as a new kind of duchess, hailed for her compassion and modern approach. The world saw a woman breaking barriers. The staff saw a woman building walls. The contradiction was unbearable. Every photo shoot, every charity visit, every glowing interview felt like an act of erasure, erasing the exhaustion, the tension, the fear. Lauren often wondered if the cameras could sense it too, that under the perfect lighting and flawless angles, something wasn't right. One particular day still haunted her. It was a sunny afternoon. Meghan had agreed to let the press capture a candid moment, a mother and child in natural light. The media team arrived early. Everything was staged to look spontaneous. Before they began, Meghan turned to Lauren and said, "Make sure he smiles. I don't want another blank expression." People project sadness when they see that. Lauren hesitated. "He's still very young, ma'am. Sometimes babies just make him smile," Meghan repeated, her tone final. The photographer started counting down, and in that moment, Lauren tried, tickling Archie's toes gently, singing softly. He smiled for a second. The shutter clicked. Meghan's eyes lit up with satisfaction. But as soon as the cameras stopped, she turned cold again. "Good," she said quietly. "Now delete the others. Only that one stays." It wasn't about the moment. It was about the control of the moment. And yet, for all her precision, there were times when cracks appeared. Nights when Meghan's facade slipped, revealing something raw. Exhaustion, fear, perhaps regret. Lauren once found her sitting in the dark nursery, tears streaming down her face. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she whispered. Meghan wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine. Just tired." Then she looked at the sleeping baby and said something that chilled Lauren to her core. "The world wants a princess. They don't care about the woman underneath." It was the only time she'd ever heard Meghan sound truly human. Vulnerable. Broken even. And for a fleeting second, Lauren pitied her. But that sympathy vanished days later when Meghan fired a housemaid for folding towels the wrong way. It was as if two souls lived inside her, the performer and the perfectionist, constantly at war. The performer wanted love, admiration, and validation. The perfectionist wanted control, power, and submission. And every person around her, Harry, Lauren, the staff, became collateral in that internal battle. Harry tried to bridge the gap. He'd often plead with her in hushed tones. "You don't have to prove anything. Just be you." But Meghan would reply sharply, "You don't understand. They'll destroy me if I'm not perfect." In that confession, perhaps, was the tragic truth that beneath the coldness was terror, fear of losing control, fear of being seen as ordinary, fear of being forgotten. Still, fear doesn't excuse cruelty, and cruelty doesn't stay hidden forever. As the weeks went on, palace whispers turned into discussions. Senior royals began asking questions. The Queen's private secretary reportedly noted patterns of distress among Frogmore staff. Someone mentioned the recording again, that it might need to be addressed. When Meghan caught wind of that conversation, her composure cracked for the first time in public. During a routine photo call, she abruptly ended the session, muttering, "I'm not doing this circus anymore." The next day, the tabloids printed headlines about Duchess fatigue. But insiders knew it wasn't fatigue, it was fury. Fury at losing grip of her story. That night, Lauren was called into the study. Meghan sat behind her desk, Harry beside her. "I hear you've been talking to people," Meghan said. Her tone was low, dangerously calm. "No, ma'am," Lauren replied immediately. "I've spoken to no one." "Then how are details of my household leaking?" Meghan asked. "Someone's feeding them." Harry shifted uncomfortably. "Meg," he began, but she raised her hand. "I'm not accusing," she said. "I'm just observing." Lauren stood frozen. The silence felt endless. Then Meghan smiled, the same slow, deliberate smile she wore for cameras. "I know loyalty when I see it," she said finally. "Don't disappoint me." It wasn't a warning. It was a sentence. From that day forward, Lauren felt watched. Her phone, her calls, even her movements seemed monitored. She began journaling privately, hiding her notes behind the nursery curtains. Each entry grew darker. Observations of emotional manipulation, power shifts, and a household unraveling under invisible tension. But she stayed. Because she loved Archie. Because leaving meant abandoning the only innocence in that palace. Still, the emotional toll was undeniable. Every act of kindness she offered was met with cold scrutiny. Every attempt at warmth became a test. And slowly, Meghan's kindness, once her most celebrated trait, turned into an icy performance she couldn't sustain. The woman who'd once spoken of compassion now used silence as punishment. The duchess who'd preached empowerment now isolated those closest to her. The mother who'd promised love now demanded obedience. And the nanny who once admired her now feared her. Because one day, that fear would come true, when Lauren's quiet devotion was mistaken for betrayal. And Meghan's obsession with control would finally explode. Because behind the smiles, behind the rehearsed interviews, behind every picture-perfect scene, one storm was brewing. The night it erupted would leave everyone shaken and lead to a confrontation no one could forget. But before that night came, one unexpected figure from within the royal circle would step in. A woman who had seen it all before. A woman who never minces her words. A woman who warned Meghan that her empire of control was about to collapse. Her name? Princess Anne. And her warning, delivered in private, would become the turning point of this entire story. Royal households run on whispers. It's not the grand statements or the official briefings that reveal the truth. It's the quiet exchanges in corridors, the half-heard murmurs behind closed doors. And one whisper inside the palace began to echo louder than any other. There's a recording. A recording of Meghan. A recording that no one was supposed to have, no one was supposed to hear, and no one was supposed to talk about. But in a palace built on secrecy, forbidden things have a way of spreading like wildfire. Lauren first heard of it in passing. A butler she trusted leaned close during breakfast and said, "Be careful what you say, Miss Khumalo. They're listening now." She thought he was joking, but he wasn't. Because a week earlier, someone had captured Meghan's outburst, not on purpose, not maliciously, but as part of an automatic recording system used for staff training. It was meant to document procedural discussions in the nursery wing, timing, scheduling, childcare updates. But on that particular night, the system caught something else. The recording began with calm conversation, the rustle of papers, Meghan giving directions about upcoming events. Then, without warning, her tone changed. "You think I'm here to play by their rules?" she said sharply. "I make the rules now." There was a pause, a soft protest from someone, maybe an aide. Then came the moment that froze everyone who heard it. "You serve me," Meghan said coldly. "Not the palace. Not the press. Me. And if anyone forgets that, I'll make sure they regret it." That was the line. The one that turned a private frustration into a palace crisis. Because those words, once spoken, carried weight far beyond the walls of Frogmore Cottage. They weren't just emotional outbursts. They were declarations of power. Declarations that undermined the monarchy's structure of loyalty and duty. When the audio reached a senior official, quietly, anonymously, it was enough to cause panic. Damage control went into immediate effect. Devices were seized. Files were scrubbed. Staff were questioned. But secrets in royal circles never die. They just get buried alive. And once buried, they fester. For weeks, no one spoke of it openly, but the tension was palpable. Meghan noticed the sudden stiffness in how people greeted her. She noticed conversations ending when she entered the room. And, worst of all, she noticed the change in Harry, distant, quieter, as if he'd been told something he couldn't unhear. At first, she thought it was paranoia. Then came confirmation, in the most unexpected form. Princess Anne, and had never been one to mince words. Known for her discipline, her directness, and her disdain for drama, she was the one royal who saw through facades instantly. When she requested a private meeting with Meghan at Buckingham, everyone knew something serious was brewing. According to insiders, the meeting lasted less than 30 minutes, but its impact was seismic. Lauren heard the details secondhand, but she would never forget them, and began the meeting with civility. "You're a bright woman," she told Meghan, "and you've got the world's attention. But attention is a dangerous thing. It turns on you the moment you think you can control it. Meghan listened in silence, arms folded, polite but unreadable, and continued. This family runs on service, not spectacle. You can't command respect by demanding it. You earn it by restraint. Then came the moment that silenced even Meghan, and leaned forward and said, "We've heard things, Meghan, things that don't reflect well. You're playing with fire, and it's not the palace that will burn. It's you." That was it. That was the warning. When Meghan returned to Frogmore that evening, she was quiet, unnervingly quiet. She went straight to the study, locked the door, and stayed inside for hours. Harry knocked once, twice, no answer. Lauren walked through the hallway later that night and saw the faint light under the door. Meghan was on the phone, her tone clipped and tense. The words recording, trust, and betrayal drifted out. Whatever Princess Anne had said, it had hit a nerve. The next morning, Meghan gathered her core staff. Not the royal aides, but her private team, her stylist, her PR strategist, and one personal assistant. The same people who'd been with her since before the wedding. "I want every device in this house checked," she said flatly. "No one records me without my consent." Not one person. Her team complied, terrified. Technicians swept the rooms for bugs. Phones were locked up for hours. Even Harry's calls were restricted. To the outside world, nothing seemed amiss. Meghan appeared smiling and radiant during a public charity event that very afternoon. But behind the perfect posture and glowing confidence, her eyes told another story, paranoia. Lauren could see it in every glance. Meghan had always been watchful. Now she was suspicious. Every whisper felt like a conspiracy. Every glance from staff a betrayal. It reached a breaking point when she summoned Lauren one evening and asked, "Have you heard anyone talking about me?" Lauren hesitated. "Talking, ma'am. About me. About my tone. My behavior." "No, ma'am," Lauren said carefully. "I only hear admiration." Meghan studied her face for a long moment, searching for lies. Then she smiled faintly. "Good. Because if anyone ever uses my words against me, they'll regret it." The next day, 2 junior staff members were dismissed without explanation. Rumor had it, they were the ones connected to the recording. Whether it was true or not, no one dared ask. But the strangest part was what happened after the dismissals. Meghan became calm again, almost serene, as if purging those she distrusted restored her sense of control. She hosted a tea for select media figures days later, laughing, glowing, performing kindness once more. Cameras captured her every move, every smile. The world adored her again. But behind the scenes, Harry was slipping. He seemed exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. His friends noticed it first. "He's walking on eggshells," one confidant allegedly said. "He's terrified of saying the wrong thing." The tension between duty and devotion tore at him. The royal family expected discretion, Meghan demanded loyalty. And now, with that recording haunting their household, he was trapped between 2 impossible truths: his love for his wife, and his obligation to the institution that raised him. One evening, he confided in Lauren. It was rare. He usually avoided deep conversations with staff. But that night, after putting Archie to bed, he lingered in the nursery doorway. "Do you ever feel," he said quietly, "that you're living 2 lives at once?" Lauren looked up, surprised. "Sometimes, yes." He smiled sadly. "So do I." Then he whispered, "And I'm not sure which one is real anymore." That moment broke her heart. Because beneath all the royal titles and headlines, there was a man unraveling, a husband caught between love and truth. And though Meghan had silenced the palace for now, she couldn't silence the growing unease inside her own home. The recording had done more than embarrass her. It had exposed something far more dangerous. Her need to control not just her story, but reality itself. And that obsession would only grow. Days turned into weeks. The palace tried to move on, but Meghan didn't. Every action became more calculated, every appearance more controlled. She began rewriting schedules, overriding royal staff decisions, and even questioning Harry's longtime advisors. It wasn't rebellion anymore, it was strategy. And the more she tried to prove her dominance, the more isolated she became. Eventually, her paranoia turned inward, toward the one person she never expected to doubt, Lauren. Because as Meghan's world tightened around her, she began seeing shadows in every act of kindness. A soft lullaby, a note left on the counter, a conversation with a visiting aide. All of it began to look suspicious through Meghan's fearful eyes. And soon, one simple misunderstanding, one harmless act of care, would be twisted into the ultimate betrayal. That's when everything would explode. But before that confrontation came, something else would happen, something that would make even the Queen take notice. Because one person wasn't afraid to step in anymore. Someone had watched Meghan spiral from afar. Someone who'd had enough. Someone who, unlike anyone else, could speak to Harry in ways no one else dared. That person was Princess Anne. And this time, she wasn't coming with a warning. She was coming with consequences. Every storm starts quietly. A ripple, a whisper, a moment when everyone pretends nothing's wrong. Until suddenly, it's too late to stop what's coming. For Harry, that storm began the night Princess Anne showed up at Frogmore Cottage unannounced. No press, no aides, no public schedule. Just Anne, the one royal who never wastes words and never tolerates nonsense, stepping out of a black car in the dead of night. The knock on the door came around 9. Meghan wasn't expecting guests. Harry opened it himself and froze. "And," he said, his voice almost a question. "Harry," she replied curtly. "We need to talk." The air inside the cottage shifted instantly. Meghan appeared in the hallway, immaculate as ever, even in her evening robe. Her smile was polite, but her tone sharp. "What a surprise," she said, and didn't return the smile. "I'm sure it is." What followed, according to palace whispers, was a conversation that no one outside those walls was ever meant to hear, but fragments of it later made their way to the people who mattered most. And didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were like blades, precise, deliberate, and unforgettable. "You're not the first to struggle in this family," she told Meghan. "But you're the first to think the rules don't apply to you." Meghan kept her composure, but Harry could feel the tension radiating off her, and continued, "We all make sacrifices for the crown. You call it control. I call it discipline. The difference between you and the rest of us is that we don't turn every inconvenience into a spectacle." Meghan's expression darkened. "I don't need a lecture, Princess Anne." "No," and said evenly, "you need perspective." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, Anne looked at Harry. "You've changed," she said softly. "I don't blame you, love does that. But don't let loyalty blind you to what's happening." She stepped closer. "The family can forgive almost anything, Harry, except betrayal." Then she turned and left. No goodbye, no glance back, just the sound of the door clicking shut. It was the kind of silence that echoes long after it ends. Meghan stood still, her jaw clenched, her breathing shallow. "How dare she," she whispered, "coming into my home, lecturing me like I'm one of her staff." Harry didn't respond. He couldn't. His heart was pounding too hard. He knew and meant well. He also knew Meghan would never forget this moment. That night was the first time Harry slept in a separate room. Lauren noticed it the next morning. 2 coffee cups, not one. 2 distinct silences, one heavy with anger, the other with exhaustion. Harry walked Archie around the garden alone, murmuring quietly to the baby. Lauren caught fragments. Pressure, can't do this forever. Something has to change. She'd seen it before. The slow unraveling of someone trying to be 2 people at once. The prince who belonged to the monarchy and the husband who belonged to Meghan. The tension was eating him alive. But Meghan didn't see it that way. She saw only threat. From the palace, from Anne, from anyone who questioned her authority. In the following days, her behavior became sharper, more controlling. She began reviewing Harry's calls, asking about who he spoke to. She insisted on reading summaries of his scheduled meetings, especially those involving senior royals. Harry protested once, gently. "I just need space," he said. Meghan smiled faintly. "Space from who?" "From me." He hesitated. "From all of it." Her voice hardened. "You think they'll give you peace if you step away? They'll destroy you the moment you show weakness." It wasn't an argument anymore. It was a battle for control disguised as concern. And Harry, torn between protecting Meghan and saving himself, began to break. He started spending more time outside, walking alone, writing, visiting old military friends in secret. But even those small escapes came at a cost. When Meghan found out about one such visit, she confronted him in the kitchen. "You went without telling me," she said quietly. "It was just for a few hours," he replied. "I needed to clear my head." "Clear your head from what, Harry?" "From me." Her tone was calm, but her eyes were burning. He'd seen that look before. The look that said, "Don't you dare step out of line." Lauren could sense the distance between them growing. She'd hear laughter one day and silence the next. Smiles during breakfast, arguments behind closed doors by afternoon. But the worst was watching Harry with Archie. He adored his son, that much was clear. But there was something sorrowful in his affection, as though every laugh and cuddle came with guilt attached. Lauren once saw him sitting in the nursery, Archie asleep in his arms. He whispered, "You deserve better than this world, little man. Better than these walls." That's when she realized Harry wasn't just struggling with marriage. He was struggling with identity. To the public, he was still the charming prince, the devoted father. But behind the scenes, he was a man unraveling under the weight of two conflicting realities. And then came the moment that pushed him over the edge. A royal aide visited to discuss upcoming events. Meghan refused to participate in a scheduled engagement and accused the palace of setting her up to fail. Harry tried to mediate, saying, "They're just doing their jobs." Meghan turned on him instantly. "Whose side are you on?" He froze. "What do you mean?" "You're defending them," she said. "You always defend them." "I'm trying to help," he said softly. "We can't keep fighting everyone." Her eyes flashed. "I'm not fighting everyone. I'm surviving everyone." That line hit him harder than any accusation. Because deep down, he knew she believed it. Meghan wasn't playing a role anymore. She was living in constant self-defense. But her survival meant his suffocation. After that argument, Harry stopped talking during meals. He avoided eye contact during planning meetings. When Meghan spoke, he nodded quietly, but his mind seemed elsewhere. Lauren once found him standing outside in the rain, staring at the empty courtyard. "Sir," she asked gently, "would you like an umbrella?" He smiled faintly. "No, thanks. I just wanted to feel something real." Those words stayed with her. Because they weren't just poetic, they were a cry for help. He was drowning in a life built on control, trapped in a marriage where love and fear coexisted in equal measure. And though the palace didn't intervene directly, Anne's visit had planted a seed. Conversations began, quiet, strategic. Words like stability, image management, and succession optics floated through official channels. Meghan sensed it all. She could feel the family closing ranks, the invisible walls tightening. And as always, she blamed betrayal. Not her behavior, not her words, but the people around her. Lauren became the unintentional target of that suspicion. Small things suddenly became offenses. A misplaced towel, a missed text, a forgotten cup of tea. And each time, Meghan's tone grew colder. "You're distracted lately," she told her one morning. "My apologies, ma'am," Lauren said. Meghan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Distraction leads to mistakes, and mistakes lead to stories. It was a veiled threat, the kind Meghan specialized in. Harry noticed the tension, but said nothing. He was too tired to fight, too afraid to add another spark to the powder keg. And so, the silence between them deepened until it felt like another person in the room, watching, waiting, suffocating. The breaking point came a week later, during a routine family photograph. The palace photographer, nervous but professional, set up the camera near the garden archway. Meghan adjusted her hair. Harry stood by her side. Archie nestled in her arms. "Smile," the photographer said softly. Harry tried. He really did, but the expression barely reached his eyes. Meghan noticed instantly. "Try again," she whispered sharply. "You look miserable." "I'm just tired," he murmured. "No, you're ruining it," she snapped. The camera clicked. The moment was immortalized, a frozen image of perfection. But the photographer later told an assistant, "I swear, I've never seen a couple look so together on film and so apart in real life." And in that contradiction lay the truth. Because behind the perfect picture was a man at his breaking point. That night, after everyone went to bed, Lauren saw Harry sitting alone in the garden, his hands buried in his hair. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked quietly. He looked up, eyes red. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said. "Not a prince, not a husband, not even a son." The wind rustled through the hedges. Somewhere in the house, Meghan's voice echoed faintly through the halls. Calm, commanding, rehearsing something for the next day. Harry stood slowly and whispered, "She's not who she was, Lauren. And I don't know if I am, either." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. And as the moonlight caught his face, the weight of everything, the pressure, the expectations, the love, the fear, finally showed. Lauren realized then that Harry wasn't angry at Meghan. He was broken because of her and for her. But she also knew something else. When a person reaches that kind of breaking point, something always gives. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's sanity. Sometimes it's loyalty.